David's seemingly perfect relationship takes a shocking turn when he catches his girlfriend, Emily, in a web of lies and betrayal. What starts as subtle red flags spirals into a devastating revelation of infidelity, manipulation, and deceit. As Emily juggles multiple lies and relationships, David is forced to confront the painful truth about trust and love. The story's controversial twists and Emily's audacious actions leave audiences outraged, questioning loyalty, honesty, and self-worth in relationships. With emotions running high, David's journey becomes a gripping exploration of heartbreak and resilience. You know, sometimes life hands you red flags and you ignore them because love. Or maybe because you tell yourself you're just being paranoid. Well, this story is about someone who got a whole parade of red flags and still wasn't ready for what was coming. It all starts with David. Now, David, 28M, is just your average guy. Hardworking, super chill, a little bit of a homebody, but in the good way, like the pizza and movie nights kind of guy. He's been dating Emily, 27F, for 2 years. And when I say they seemed perfect, I mean the Instagram. Couple goals kind of perfect. Emily. She's one of those people who lights up a room, outgoing, ambitious, and someone you can never really stay mad at. You know the type. Big smile, sweet voice, David always called her. The best thing that ever happened to him. And his friends. They agreed. They used to say David outkicked his coverage, and he'd laugh because, hey, they were probably right. At this point, life was on autopilot. They'd settled into their rhythm, weekdays filled with work, evenings at each other's apartments, and weekends spent exploring the city or planning their someday trips. Oh, and the occasional double date with David's best friend, Jake, 29M, and his girlfriend, Sarah, 28F. Jake and David had been best friends since middle school, and Sarah, well, let's just say she and Emily clicked immediately. Now, here's where things get interesting, because when things are too good, you start to wonder, or at least David's subconscious did. It all started small. I'm talking tiny things that David didn't even register at first. Like Emily's phone, which used to be glued to her side, suddenly face down on the table. Or the fact that she started getting stuck at work more often. At first, David didn't think much of it. Emily worked at a marketing firm, and over time was pretty common. And the phone. Well, who doesn't have moments when they're glued to their phone and moments when they're not? But then, there was the change in routine. See, every Friday night, like clockwork, Emily used to spend the night at David's place. Pizza, Netflix, cuddles, the works, it was their night. But a few weeks ago, that started to change. Emily had an excuse ready every time. Oh, I promised my coworker I'd go to happy hour. I need a night to myself, babe, long week. And sure, David brushed it off, because he wasn't the clingy type, he trusted her. But man, something felt off. Here's where Jake comes in. Because Jake. He's the guy who says what everyone else is thinking. One night, the two of them were out grabbing drinks. Just a guy's night, like old times. And out of nowhere, Jake drops this little gem. Hey man, Emily seems kinda distant lately. Everything good? David laughed it off, because what else was he supposed to say? Yeah, man, she's just busy. Work's been nuts for her lately. But Jake wasn't convinced. He leaned in, giving David that look. The, I'm about to tell you something you don't want to hear. Look, listen. I don't want to overstep, but I've seen this before. You sure there's nothing going on? And for the first time, David felt it. That weird little knot in your stomach when someone says out loud what you've been trying not to think. He shrugged it off, though because Emily wasn't like that. She loved him. She wouldn't do that. Right. Fast forward a week. It's Thursday evening, and David's at home scrolling through his phone when Emily texts, "Hey, babe, can't make it tonight. Work dinner ran late. I'll call you when I get home." Now at first, David was like, "Okay, no big deal." But then something weird happened. About an hour later, Jake sent him a Snapchat. It was a picture of Emily at a bar, with some guy David didn't recognize. David's heart dropped. He texted Jake. "Where are you?" Jake replied almost immediately. "Some bar downtown, dude. I thought she said she was working." David sat there staring at his phone, trying to figure out what to do. Should he text her? Call her go down there and see for himself? But in the end, he did nothing. I know. You're probably yelling at your screen right now. But here's the thing. When you love someone, your brain works overtime to protect that image of them. He told himself, maybe it's just a coworker. Maybe Jake's wrong. And so when Emily finally called him at 11 p.m., sounding totally normal, he played along. "Hey, babe. Sorry I'm so late. Work was crazy." David swallowed hard. "Yeah, no worries. How was dinner?" "It was fine," she said. "Just a bunch of boring work talk." And just like that, the conversation was over. But David couldn't shake the image of her at that bar. The following week, things escalated. Emily's excuses got flimsier. The distance between them more obvious. David's friends started to notice too, especially Jake. And then came the turning point. One Saturday, Emily told David she was going to brunch with the girls. She even sent him a cute little selfie from a cafe downtown. But here's where she messed up. David was already downtown. And guess what that cafe? It wasn't where she said she'd be. He called her, no answer. He texted her, no reply. So David did something he never thought he'd do. He went looking for her. It didn't take long to find her. He spotted her across the street, standing outside a small bar, and she wasn't alone. She was laughing, smiling, and holding hands with some guy David had never seen before. For a second, he just froze. It was like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. This isn't real, he thought. This can't be real. But it was. David watched as the guy leaned in, kissed Emily on the cheek, and wrapped his arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, something inside David just snapped. So, there you have it. David thought he had the perfect relationship, but clearly, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. And trust me, things are about to get way worse. So there David was, standing frozen on the street like a statue, watching the girl he loved, the one he'd planned his future with, getting cozy with some random guy. At first, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like his entire world was crumbling right there in front of him. Maybe it's not what it looks like. That's what he told himself, because denial is easier than heartbreak. But his mind kept replaying what he'd just seen. Emily smiling, holding hands with this guy like they'd been together for years. At this point, most people would storm across the street, make a scene, demand answers, but David, he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked away, head spinning. His phone buzzed. It was Emily. Perfect timing, right? Emily. "Hey, babe. Brunch ran late. Heading home soon. I miss you." David stared at the message. "I miss you." What a joke. He wanted to throw his phone, to scream, to confront her and demand to know what the hell was going on. But instead, he played it cool. Almost too cool. "David. No worries. See you later." And that was it. But let me tell you, when David got home, that calm exterior was gone. He sat in his car for a solid 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His thoughts were spiraling. Who is that guy? How long has this been going on? Am I crazy for even thinking this? He wasn't ready to confront Emily. Not yet. He needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. Now, before you judge him for what he did next, let me just say, when you've been blindsided like this, you're not exactly thinking straight. David started paying closer attention to Emily, her phone habits, her schedule, little changes in her stories. And sure enough, cracks started showing. Her phone always on silent. If a notification popped up, she'd turn it face down before David could even glance at it. Her schedule, suddenly unpredictable. Meetings that ran late, impromptu girls' nights, errands that took way too long. Her mood, weirdly happy when she wasn't with David. Almost too happy. It was subtle, but it was there. Now, here's where things get wild. One day, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. David didn't want to look seriously. He told himself, "Don't do it, man. This is crossing a line." But curiosity, and let's be honest, paranoia, got the best of him. He picked it up. The message from someone named Jay. "Yesterday was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." David's heart stopped. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. Who the hell is Jay? And yesterday, she told him she was working late, and that's when it hit him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a coworker or a casual friend. This was something more. David put the phone back exactly where he found it and sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to completely lose it. Emily walked in, towel wrapped around her, smiling like nothing was wrong. "You okay, babe?" she asked. David forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." But inside he was breaking. The next day, David met up with Jake for lunch. Now Jake had been skeptical for weeks, but when David told him about the message and what he saw outside the bar, Jake's reaction was instant. "Dude, that's it. She's cheating." David shook his head. "I don't know that yet. I don't want to accuse her without proof." But Jake wasn't having it. "Look, man, you already have proof, you just don't want to admit it. The phone, the lies, the guy at the bar. Come on." And honestly, Jake wasn't wrong. Deep down, David knew the truth. He just didn't want to face it. That's when Jake hit him with the classic advice, "You need to confront her tonight." David wasn't sure what if he was wrong. What if this all blew up and he lost her over a misunderstanding? But at the same time, he couldn't keep living like this, doubting every word she said, second-guessing everything. That night, David decided he was done pretending Emily came over for their usual date night, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She walked in, kissed him on the cheek, and plopped down on the couch. "What do you want to watch tonight?" David didn't sit. He stood there, staring at her, his heart pounding. "We need to talk." Emily looked up, confused. "What's wrong?" "Who's Jay?" And just like that, the room went silent. I'm talking dead silent. Emily blinked, her face unreadable. "What are you talking about?" David swallowed hard. "I saw the message. Emily." "Yesterday wasn't work. You were with him, weren't you?" For a second, she just stared at him, like she was processing what he'd said. And then she laughed. "I can't believe you went through my phone," she said, shaking her head. "That's such a violation of trust." David's blood boiled. "I'm violating trust. Are you serious right now? You've been lying to me, sneaking around with some guy, and I'm the problem?" And here's the kicker. Emily didn't deny it. She didn't come clean either. Instead, she flipped the script. "I can't do this. she said, grabbing her bag. "You clearly don't trust me, and if we don't have trust, we don't have anything." And just like that, she walked out. David sat there, stunned. Did that just happen? Did she really just turn this around on him? The next few days were brutal. Emily wasn't responding to his texts or calls, and David was left to pick up the pieces. But as painful as it was, something weird happened. The longer he went without her, the clearer things became. He started replaying the relationship in his head, seeing all the little red flags he'd ignored. The nights she canceled plans, the sudden mood swings, the weird excuses, and of course, the message from Jay. David realized something. Emily wasn't who he thought she was, and as much as it hurt to admit it, this was probably for the best. But here's where it gets really crazy. Because just when David thought he'd seen the worst of it, Jake dropped another bombshell. Jake called him up one night, his voice urgent. "Bro, you're not gonna believe this. You know that guy Emily was with?" David's heart raced. "Yeah?" "I found out who he is. It's her co-worker. And get this. Apparently they've been seeing each other for months." David felt like he'd been punched in the gut months. All that time he'd spent loving her, trusting her, planning a future with her. She'd been lying straight to his face. Jake sighed. "I'm sorry, man. You deserve better than this." And he was right. For the first time in weeks, David felt something besides anger or heartbreak. He felt relief, because now, at least, he knew the truth. Before we get to the final part of this wild story, let me know your thoughts so far in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation like David's? And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next update. Alright, let's get back to it. Trust me, the next part is where things get even messier. So, where were we? Yes, David, blindsided, heartbroken, and finally seeing Emily for who she really was. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was the truth. Months of betrayal hidden behind her smile and sweet words. But hold on, because this story is about to take a turn that no one saw coming. After Jake's revelation, David hit his breaking point. No more sitting around wondering. No more obsessing over what-ifs. He needed answers, and this time, he was going to get them, no matter what. So what did he do? Well, let's just say David went full detective mode. And trust me, this wasn't just scrolling through Instagram or checking her Snapchat score. No. David decided to confront Emily in a way that would leave no room for lies. The next day, David called her up, keeping his voice steady. "Hey, can we talk? I think we need to clear the air." Surprisingly, Emily agreed. Maybe she thought she could smooth things over, do that whole gaslight and deny thing she'd been pulling for weeks. Or maybe she thought David was still in the dark. Either way, she showed up at his apartment later that evening, looking casual and unbothered. David let her in, but this time he wasn't playing nice. Emily sat down on the couch, smiling like nothing had happened. "What did you want to talk about?" David stared at her, trying to keep his cool. "Who's Jay?" And there it was again, that pause, that flicker of panic in her eyes, before she masked it with a laugh. "Oh my God, are we still on this David? I told you. He's just a friend from work. You're being so dramatic." David didn't flinch. "I know you're lying, Emily. I know you've been seeing him, and I know it's been going on for months." Her smile faltered. "Where is this coming from?" David pulled out his phone. "Jake told me who he is. I've got proof. So stop lying to me and tell me the truth." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily sat there, frozen, as the reality of the situation hit her. She couldn't lie her way out of this one. David wasn't guessing anymore. He knew. And then she did what cheaters always seem to do when they're caught. She tried to shift the blame. Okay, fine. Yes, I've been seeing him, but it's your fault, David. You were so distant. You stopped making me feel special. David just blinked. My fault? Yeah, she snapped, like it made perfect sense. You got boring, David. All you ever want to do is stay home and watch movies. I wanted more. Now, let's pause here for a second. I don't know about you, but blaming someone else for your decision to cheat. That's a bold move. David, to his credit, didn't explode. He just stared at her, hurt but calm. You should have just ended things, Emily. You didn't have to do this. Emily scoffed. And lose everything we had, you would have never understood. David shook his head, finally seeing her for who she really was. Selfish, manipulative, and incapable of taking responsibility. You're right, he said, standing up. I don't understand, and I don't want to anymore. We're done. Emily tried to argue, but David wasn't listening. He opened the door and gestured for her to leave. Goodbye, Emily. And just like that, she was gone. Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? David confronted her, got the truth, kicked her out. Case closed. But anyone who's ever been through heartbreak knows it's never that simple. The days that followed were rough. David felt hollow, like someone had ripped a hole in his chest. He'd given Emily everything, his love, his trust, his future plans, and she threw it all away like it meant nothing. At first, he did what we all do after a breakup. He reread old texts, trying to pinpoint the moment things went wrong. He scrolled through her Instagram, even though he knew it would make him feel worse. He stayed up late, replaying every moment of their relationship in his head. And of course, the thought that haunted him the most was, why wasn't I enough? But here's the thing about rock bottom. You can't stay there forever. At some point, you either climb out or you let it swallow you whole. And David, he wasn't about to let this break him. Luckily for David, he had Jake now. Let me tell you, everyone needs a friend like Jake during a breakup. The guy didn't let David wallow for long. One night, Jake showed up at David's apartment with pizza, beer, and a pep talk ready to go. All right, bro, enough of this. She's gone, she's trash, and you're better off time to start acting like it. David sighed. I know, man, I'm just not there yet. Jake didn't push. Instead, he just said, one day at a time, but you're not doing this alone. Over the next few weeks, Jake dragged David out of the house. Gym sessions, pick-up basketball games, even a weekend hiking trip. Slowly but surely, David started to feel like himself again. He also learned something important. Emily's actions weren't a reflection of him. They were a reflection of her. Now, just when David thought he was finally moving on, life threw him one last curveball. About a month after the breakup, he ran into an old co-worker of Emily's, let's call her Lisa. They bumped into each other at a coffee shop, and after some small talk, Lisa casually asked, So, are you and Emily still together? David shook his head. Nope, we're done. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I figured she and Jason got pretty serious. David froze. Jason? Lisa blinked, confused. Yeah, her co-worker. You didn't know? David's stomach dropped. He knew the guy existed, sure, but hearing his name made it real. Jason wasn't just some random fling. He was someone Emily had built a whole relationship with behind David's back. Lisa, clearly picking up on the awkwardness, quickly changed the subject. Well, I'm sorry. David, you deserved better. And just like that, the conversation was over. Here's where it gets good. A week after that conversation, David was out with Jake and a few other friends at a bar. They were laughing, having a good time, until David spotted her. Emily with Jason. It was like a scene out of a movie. She was sitting at the far end of the bar, holding Jason's hand and leaning in close, just like she used to do with David. Jake saw her too. "You want to leave?" David shook his head. "No, I'm good." And for the first time since everything happened, he meant it. Emily eventually noticed him, her eyes widening in shock. She froze, clearly unsure whether to wave, say hi, or just pretend he didn't exist. Jason, oblivious, kept talking to her. David met her gaze for a moment, gave her the smallest of nods, and turned back to his friends. He didn't need to confront her. He didn't need an apology. He didn't need anything from her. Because in that moment, he realized he was free. So, what's the takeaway here? For David, it was this. Sometimes people will betray you. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep someone faithful. And sometimes the person you trust the most will turn out to be a stranger. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. It doesn't mean you're not enough. It just means you were with the wrong person. David didn't get closure from Emily, at least, not the kind where she sat him down and apologized. But he didn't need it, because closure doesn't come from someone else. It comes from realizing you're better off without them. And let me tell you, David, he's doing just fine now. He's happier, healthier, and more focused on himself than ever before. Before we wrap up, let me know in the comments, have you ever experienced a betrayal like David's? How did you move on? I'd love to hear your stories. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more wild stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. At this point, you're probably thinking, David's done, right? He knows about Jason, he's walked away, and he's healing. Well, that's what David thought too. But life. Oh, life has a way of stirring up trouble just when you think the dust has settled. Let's rewind to about 2 weeks after David saw Emily with Jason at the bar. David had been doing pretty well for himself, hitting the gym, hanging out with friends, focusing on his own goals. He even deleted her number, blocked her on social media, the whole 9 yards. But then it happened. One evening, David was leaving his apartment when he saw someone sitting on the steps outside his building. And who was it? Emily. Yeah, you heard that right. Out of nowhere, there she was, looking disheveled, teary-eyed, and completely out of place. David froze. His first instinct was to turn around and pretend he hadn't seen her, but she looked up, and their eyes met. David, can we talk? Now, let me paint the scene for you. David's blood was boiling, his pulse was racing, and every part of him wanted to say no and keep walking. But curiosity. Oh, curiosity is a sneaky little thing. So he sighed and said, "What do you want, Emily?" Emily stood up, brushing herself off like she hadn't been sitting there for hours. I made a mistake, David. I need you to hear me out." David narrowed his eyes. "A mistake? You mean cheating on me for months and lying about it?" Emily winced, but she didn't deny it. "Yes, okay, I messed up, but it wasn't what you think." David scoffed. "Oh, really? Enlighten me, Emily." Here's where Emily's explanation got interesting. According to her, Jason, yes, that Jason, was just someone who listened to her when she felt alone. She claimed she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she felt neglected, and Jason was there at the right time. I didn't love him, David. I swear it was just a stupid mistake. Now, let's pause for a second. Cheaters love to play the "it was a mistake" card, like they accidentally tripped and fell into months of deceit. David wasn't buying it. Emily, a mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. Cheating is a choice over and over again. Her face crumbled, and for a moment, David actually felt a pang of something. Anger, sadness, maybe just pity. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I miss you. I still love you." But David didn't flinch. Not this time. He'd spent weeks replaying their relationship, asking himself if he'd done something wrong. But standing there, looking at Emily, he realized something. This wasn't about him. It was never about him. "You don't love me, Emily," he said quietly. "You love what I did for you. You love how easy I made your life. But you didn't love me. Not enough, to be honest, at least." Her tears were flowing now, and she started reaching for him, begging for a second chance. "Please, David, I'll do anything. I just want us back." And you know what David did. He turned and walked away. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet, final goodbye. Because at that point, he knew the truth. You can't rebuild something that was never solid in the first place. Now, you'd think this would be the end. Right, wrong. 2 days later, Jake called David with some news that would turn everything upside down. "Bro, have you checked Emily's Instagram lately?" David frowned. "I blocked her, remember?" "Well, unblock her for 2 seconds because you're not going to believe this." Reluctantly, David unblocked her and pulled up her profile. And there it was. A brand new post. Emily and Jason smiling arms around each other. The caption, "Sometimes you find love where you least expect it." David stared at his phone, speechless. The love. 2 days ago, she was crying on his doorstep begging for him back, and now she's posting lovey-dovey pictures with Jason? Jake was practically shouting on the other end of the line. "Unbelievable, right? She's playing you and him, dude." At first, David felt anger bubbling up again. But then he laughed. "I know. It sounds weird, right? But sometimes you hit a point where the drama just gets so ridiculous, you can't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all." And that's when David realized something. Emily wasn't his problem anymore. Let Jason deal with her games. Let someone else carry that chaos. The final turning point came a week later. David was out with Jake and a few other friends when they ran into Emily and Jason at the same bar. Yeah, awkward. Emily looked shocked to see him. She glanced at Jason, who was oblivious, then back at David like she was testing him, waiting to see if he'd lose it, confront her, or cause a scene. But David, he just smiled, nodded politely, and went back to his friends. Jake leaned over. "Dude, are you good?" David shrugged. "I'm great, man. Let her be his problem now." And that was it. No drama, no bitterness. Just David moving on with his life, finally free of all the lies, all the guilt, and all the second-guessing. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. So, what can we learn from David's story? Here's the thing about closure. It doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It doesn't come from their apologies or their excuses or their regret. It comes from within. David didn't get closure from Emily. He got it from accepting the truth, letting go of what wasn't meant for him, and realizing that he deserved better. And the best part, he came out stronger. Sure, betrayal hurts. It shakes your confidence and makes you question everything, but eventually it teaches you something too. It teaches you to trust your instincts. It shows you who's really in your corner. Shout out to Jake. And most importantly, it reminds you that you will be okay, no matter how bad it feels right now. Because at the end of the day, someone else's betrayal doesn't define you, it defines them. All right, guys, what do you think about David's story? Have you ever dealt with someone like Emily, who tried to flip the blame and play the victim? How did you handle it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, share it with a friend who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Remember, sometimes letting go is the best thing you can do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Just when David thought he'd escaped the madness of Emily and Jason, life threw him one last curveball. And trust me, this is where things get juicy. It started with a phone call. Late one night, David's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, he'd ignore it, but for some reason, he picked up. Hello? The voice on the other end, Jason. Yeah, you heard that right, Jason. David, man, I need to talk to you, Jason said, sounding stressed. It's about Emily. David sat up straight. Why the hell is Jason calling me? I don't know why you think I'd care, David replied, his voice cold. No, listen, she's been lying to me too. I think you and I both got played. Now, if this were a movie, this would be the moment where everything clicks, the moment where the audience sits forward in their seats, eyes glued to the screen. Because Jason wasn't the villain of this story. He was just another guy caught in Emily's web. Jason's voice was shaky as he explained. She told me you were out of the picture, that you were some crazy ex who couldn't let go. But I started noticing things. Texts she'd delete. Late nights where she disappeared. I found out she was still talking to you. David blinked. She wasn't talking to me. She showed up at my place crying, begging to get back together. Jason fell silent. You're kidding me. Nope, David said bitterly. And 2 days later, she posted a picture of you two, acting like nothing happened. Jason cursed under his breath. I can't believe this. She played us both. And here's the kicker. Jason wasn't even the only one. She's been texting another guy too, I don't know who he is, but I found messages on her laptop. She told him the same crap she told me, about being unhappy, about us not understanding her. At this point, David didn't know whether to feel angry or relieved. On one hand, he'd dodged a massive bullet. On the other hand, he couldn't believe how far Emily's lies had gone. I don't know what to say, man, David admitted. You've got a choice to make, but I'm done with her. Jason sighed. Yeah, I think I'm done too. Now, you'd think that phone call would have been the end of it. But oh no, Emily's story wasn't done unraveling just yet. The next weekend, David and Jake were grabbing lunch at a cafe downtown. It was a sunny day, the perfect setting for a little peace and quiet. But as fate would have it, guess who walked in? Emily, with another guy. And not just any guy, Jason. Yep. After everything, she and Jason were still together, or at least trying to be. They sat at a table in the corner, and David couldn't help but watch. Emily was laughing, acting like nothing was wrong, while Jason looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jake noticed too. Dude, you want to leave? But David shook his head. Nah, I'm fine. And then something incredible happened. Jason's phone buzzed. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. Without saying a word, he stood up and walked out of the cafe, leaving Emily sitting there alone. Emily looked confused, like she didn't understand what was happening. She pulled out her phone, probably texting him, but Jason didn't come back. Jake smirked. Guess someone else found out the truth. David nodded, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. He didn't need to say anything to Emily. Her lies were catching up to her all on their own. That moment in the cafe marked a turning point for David. For weeks, he'd been carrying the weight of Emily's betrayal, replaying everything in his head, wondering where it all went wrong. But seeing her there, still lying, still manipulating, made him realize something important. Emily wasn't his responsibility anymore. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need closure. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Because Emily, she was her own downfall. From that day on, David felt lighter. He stopped checking her social media. He stopped talking about her to Jake. He stopped letting her live rent-free in his head. And let me tell you, he started living his best life. Over the next few months, David completely turned things around. He threw himself into his passions, hiking, playing basketball, hitting the gym. He started meeting new people, going on dates, and rediscovering who he was outside of his relationship with Emily. And here's the best part. David wasn't bitter anymore. Sure, what happened sucked. It hurt like hell. But he learned something valuable from it. He learned to trust his instincts. He learned not to settle for someone who doesn't respect him. And he learned that sometimes the hardest thing you can do, letting go, is also the best thing. Jake noticed the change too. "Man, you're like a whole new person," he said one night. "Proud of you." David just smiled. "Thanks, man. I think I'm finally over it." Now, I know what you're thinking. What happened to Emily? Did she get her happily ever after? Well, not exactly. A few months later, David heard through the grapevine that Jason had dumped her. Apparently, he'd finally had enough of her lies, and as for the other guy she was texting, yeah, he ghosted her too. Emily tried to reach out to David one last time, sending a long, rambling text about how she missed him and wanted to be friends. David didn't even reply. He just smiled, deleted the message, and moved on with his day, because at that point, he knew he was better off. So what's the moral of this story? Sometimes life will knock you down. People you love will betray you, and it'll feel like the end of the world. But you know what? It's not. David came out of this mess stronger, smarter, and happier than ever. He didn't let Emily's actions define him. He didn't let her lies break him. Instead, he used the pain as fuel to become a better version of himself. And that's the takeaway here. Never settle for less than you deserve. Trust your instincts, even when it's hard. And remember, someone else's betrayal says nothing about your worth. David walked away from that chapter of his life with his head held high, and you know what? He's doing just fine. All right, guys, that's the end of David's story. What do you think? Have you ever dealt with someone like Emily? How did you find closure and move on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Because trust me, there's always another story waiting to be told. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Just when David thought he was done with Emily for good, Jason reached out again. This time, Jason wasn't just stressed, he sounded desperate. "David, man, I need to see you. It's about Emily. It's worse than we thought." David sighed, worse. How could it get any worse? But curiosity got the better of him. They agreed to meet up at a local diner, and when Jason walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down, ran a hand through his hair, and got straight to the point. "Emily's been lying to everyone. I found out she's seeing someone else, while she was still with me. And it's not just a fling. She's been telling this guy the same stuff she told us." David leaned back, a mix of shock and disbelief washing over him. "Are you serious? How did you find out?" Jason slid his phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots, messages between Emily and yet another guy. And let me tell you, these messages were wild. Emily had been spinning the same web of lies with this new guy, talking about how toxic her last relationships were, how she'd been mistreated, and how he was the only one who truly understood her. David shook his head, equal parts disgusted and impressed at her audacity. "So what are you gonna do?" Jason sighed. "I don't know, man. I feel like an idiot. But I'm done. I can't deal with her games anymore." For the first time, David actually felt bad for Jason. He realized they'd both been played. Different timelines, same outcome. But for Jason, the betrayal was fresh, raw, and still hard to process. David leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You're not an idiot. You just trusted the wrong person. We both did." Jason nodded. "Yeah, but she's not going to stop. Someone has to expose her for what she is." Jason wasn't just venting. He had a plan. He wanted to confront Emily once and for all, to call her out on everything she'd done, and somehow he convinced David to come with him. Now, before you say it, yes, David knew he didn't need to be there. But there's something about closure, about seeing the truth laid bare, that makes it impossible to walk away. So there they were, David and Jason, standing outside Emily's apartment building. Jason buzzed the intercom. "Who is it?" Emily's voice crackled through. "It's me. Open up. We need to talk," Jason said, his tone sharp. There was a pause, and then the door clicked open. When they got to Emily's door, she opened it with a forced smile. "Jason, what are you doing here? And David?" Her eyes darted nervously between them. Jason didn't waste time. He held up his phone, showing her the screenshots. "Care to explain this, Emily? Who's the new guy?" Emily's face went pale. What are you talking about?" Jason's voice rose. "Don't play dumb. You've been lying to me, to David, and to him. What the hell is wrong with you?" David stayed quiet, watching it all unfold. He wasn't angry anymore. He just wanted to see her squirm, to see her finally face the consequences of her actions. Emily's mask cracked. She stammered. "You don't understand. I was lonely. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Jason laughed bitterly. "Lonely? You were seeing 3 guys at once. That's not loneliness, that's manipulation." And here's where things got messy. Emily's defense turned into an attack. She pointed at David. "This is your fault too. You were boring, and you never tried to make me happy. What did you expect me to do?" David raised an eyebrow. "Don't blame me for your choices, Emily. You could have walked away if you weren't happy. Instead, you chose to lie." Jason added, "And what about me? What's my excuse? Or the new guy?" Emily's face crumbled. She had no answer. She just stood there, exposed. No more lies, no more excuses. "You don't get to play the victim here," David said calmly. "You did this to yourself." Jason shook his head, disgusted. "I'm done. I hope you're happy, Emily, because you're gonna end up alone if you keep this up." And with that, they both walked out, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. As David and Jason stepped outside, there was no anger, no bitterness, just relief. Jason broke the silence first. "That felt good, man," David chuckled. "Yeah, it did." For David, this was the moment he truly let go. Emily's betrayal had haunted him for months, but seeing her unravel, seeing her lies collapse under their own weight, it was all the closure he needed. He turned to Jason. "We're better off without her." Jason nodded. "You're right. Good luck, man." They shook hands and parted ways. David didn't look back. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Sometimes the people you love will disappoint you. They'll lie, cheat, and manipulate, and you'll wonder what you did wrong. But the truth, it's not your fault. Emily's actions weren't about David or Jason. They were about her own insecurities, her inability to take responsibility, and her need for validation. David learned that the hard way, but in the end he came out stronger. He didn't let her lies define him. He didn't let her games destroy him. Instead, he walked away with his head held high, knowing he deserved better. Months later, David's life looked completely different. He'd started a new job, moved to a new apartment, and even started seeing someone new, a girl named Natalie who was kind, honest, and nothing like Emily. Jake, of course, gave him a hard time about it. "Man, you're finally moving on, proud of you." David smiled. "Yeah, I'm happy." And he meant it. For the first time in a long time, he was free. Free from the lies. Free from the pain. Free to be himself again. So what can we learn from David's story? When someone betrays you, it's easy to let anger and bitterness take over. It's easy to let them ruin you. But at the end of the day, their actions say more about them than they ever will about you. David didn't get closure from Emily. He created it for himself. And that's what you have to do too. Because sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. All right, guys, what do you think? Have you ever had to confront someone who betrayed you? Did you find closure, or did you have to create it for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Remember, moving on is the best revenge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. After the confrontation with Emily, David thought it was over. Finally, he had said his piece, walked away, and for the first time, the weight of her betrayal didn't feel so heavy. But here's the thing about people like Emily. They never go quietly. 2 days later, David's phone lit up with a string of notifications. Emily was blowing up his messages, sending long paragraphs that ranged from apologetic to outright manipulative. "David, I made mistakes, but I don't deserve this. You humiliated me in front of Jason. I loved you, and you treated me like garbage. I'll do anything to fix this. Please give me another chance." At first, David ignored it. He had nothing left to say to her. But then, she sent something that made his stomach drop. "If you don't talk to me, I'll tell everyone about your secrets." Now, this wasn't just another attempt at begging. It was a threat, a low blow, and one that caught David completely off guard. What secrets was she talking about? Jake, of course, was the first to hear about it. David showed him the texts, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's trying to scare me now. I don't even know what she means." Jake frowned. "She's desperate, man. She's throwing anything she can at the wall to see what sticks." David sighed. "Yeah, but what if she really tries something? What if she starts spreading lies?" And right there, the tension kicked up a notch. Because David wasn't just dealing with Emily's manipulations anymore. Now he had to worry about damage control. The next day, things escalated. David's phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. One of his friends had tagged him in a post. Confused, he clicked the link, and his heart sank. It was a post from Emily, a long, dramatic caption paired with an old photo of the two of them, looking happy and in love. "I gave everything to someone who never truly cared. I made mistakes. Yes, but at least I was honest about who I am. Some people would rather destroy you than admit their own faults." The comments were already rolling, and Emily's friends, people David didn't even know, were jumping to her defense. "You're so strong, girl. Don't let him bring you down. You deserve better guys like that don't know how to appreciate a real woman." David's blood boiled. Honest. Was she serious? He knew this wasn't about telling her side of the story. This was about control. Emily couldn't stand that David had walked away, so she decided to spin the narrative and make herself the victim. Jake called as soon as he saw the post. "Dude, this is insane. Are you okay?" David clenched his jaw. "Yeah, I'm fine." But deep down, he wasn't fine. The anger was bubbling up inside him, threatening to explode. He'd kept quiet through all of this, trying to take the high road, but Emily's post pushed him over the edge. "I'm done playing nice," David said. "She wants to act like she's innocent. Fine. Let's see how she likes it when the truth comes out." That night, David sat down with Jake and laid it all out. He wasn't going to let Emily manipulate the story anymore. He was going to expose the truth, but he was going to do it the right way. "No name-calling, no drama," David explained. "I'm just going to tell my side of the story, plain and simple." Jake nodded, impressed. "You sure about this? It's risky. She's not going to take it well." David shrugged. "I don't care anymore. I've let her walk all over me for too long." So David wrote a post of his own. He kept it short, simple, and brutally honest. "I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm tired of seeing lies. I was loyal, I was trusting, and I gave everything to someone who didn't deserve it. Cheating isn't a mistake, it's a choice. I walked away because I respect myself too much to stay in a relationship built on lies." He didn't mention Emily by name. He didn't need to. Within minutes, his phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends and acquaintances reached out, offering their support. Some even shared their own stories of being betrayed, telling David how much they admired his strength. And Emily, well, let's just say she didn't take it well. It didn't take long for Emily to fire back. She sent a string of furious texts, each one angrier than the last. "How dare you make me look bad? You think you're so perfect, David, newsflash. You're not. Delete that post or I swear I'll ruin you." David read her messages and realized something. Emily had lost control, and she knew it. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. By staying calm and refusing to engage, he was taking away her power. But the next morning, David got a message from an unexpected person. Jason. "Bro, Emily's going off the rails. She just showed up at my place screaming about you." David raised an eyebrow. "What did she say?" Jason replied, "That you ruined her life. She's blaming you for everything now. Honestly, I think she's unraveling." And he was right. Emily's lies, manipulations, and desperation had finally caught up to her. A few days later, the dust started to settle. Emily deleted her post, blocked David on everything, and disappeared from his life for good. David felt relieved. It was over. No more drama, no more lies, no more mind games. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. He met up with Jake for a celebratory drink. "You know what's funny?" David said, raising his glass. "I spent so much time thinking I'd never get over her, but now I barely think about her at all." Jake grinned. "That's what happens when you let go, man. Cheers to you." And that's exactly what David did. He let go. So, what can we take away from David's story? Sometimes the people who hurt you the most will try to make you feel like you're the problem. They'll lie, manipulate, and twist the truth to fit their version of the story. But the truth, It always comes out. David learned that you don't need to fight every battle or stoop to someone else's level. Sometimes, the best way to win is to walk away with your dignity intact. And let me tell you, he came out stronger than ever. What do you think of David's story? Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to make you the villain after they were in the wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you handled it. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more crazy, relatable stories like this one. Remember, sometimes walking away is the ultimate power move. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Just when David thought he had completely closed the chapter on Emily, life decided to throw one more twist his way. A final test, if you will. It happened on an ordinary Friday evening. David was at his usual spot, a small local bar, with Jake and a couple of other friends. They were laughing, enjoying themselves, and for the first time in months, David felt like his life was normal again. And then she walked in. Emily. Yep. Like a scene straight out of a movie, Emily stepped through the door, looking effortlessly put together, like she'd been rehearsing for this moment. The bar wasn't crowded, so it didn't take her long to spot David sitting with his friends. Jake noticed her immediately, leaning in to whisper, "Oh, come on. What's she doing here?" David's heart did a weird flip. Not because he still had feelings for her, but because seeing her again stirred up every memory, every lie, and every ounce of betrayal he'd buried over the past few months. Here's the thing. When you finally move on, seeing the person who hurt you can feel like a test. It's not about them anymore. It's about you. Are you really over it, or are you just pretending? David took a deep breath. I'm fine. She doesn't matter anymore. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. You sure? David nodded. Trust me, I've already won. But of course, Emily wasn't going to let the night pass quietly. She walked straight to the bar, ordered a drink, and then, like clockwork, made her way toward David's table. The air around them shifted. It's that kind of moment where everyone gets quiet, waiting to see what happens next. Hey, David, she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. David looked up, meeting her gaze. Emily. Her expression was unreadable, part confident, part desperate. Can we talk for a second? Jake immediately stepped in. You've got to be kidding me, Emily. Take a hint, the guy's done with you. But David held up a hand, stopping Jake before he could say more. It's okay, I'll talk to her. Jake shot him a warning look. Don't let her drag you back into this mess. I won't, David replied firmly. He stood up, following Emily to a quieter corner of the bar. His pulse was steady, his mind clear, because this time he wasn't the same guy she'd walked all over. Emily turned to face him, her mask slipping just enough for David to see the cracks underneath. I didn't think I'd see you here, she started, fidgeting with her drink. David didn't flinch. Cut to the chase, Emily. What do you want? She sighed, and for a moment it looked like she might cry. I know I messed up, David. I know I hurt you. But I'm different now. I've been working on myself, and I wanted to see if there was any chance you could forgive me. David raised an eyebrow. Forgive you? Yes, she said quickly. I made mistakes, huge mistakes, but I've realized how much I lost when I lost you. Now let's pause here for a second. This is the moment where the tension reaches its peak, the final showdown between the betrayed and the betrayer. David stared at her, his mind flashing back to everything she'd done, the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. Once upon a time, this apology might have cracked him. He might have believed her words, let her back into his life, and ended up in the same toxic cycle all over again. But not this time. David shook his head, his voice calm and steady. "Emily, you didn't lose me. You threw me away, and the fact that you're here now doesn't change that." She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected him to call her out so bluntly. "David, please." "No," he interrupted. "I'm not doing this. You don't get to show up and act like you're the victim. You made your choices, and I made mine. We're done. You need to move on." Emily's face fell. For the first time. She didn't have a comeback. She just stared at him, her confidence unraveling in real time. David turned to leave, and for a moment she reached for his arm. "David, wait." But he pulled away gently, looked her in the eye, and said the words that finally ended it. "You don't get to have a place in my life anymore. Goodbye, Emily." And with that, he walked away. David rejoined his friends, sitting back down at the table like nothing had happened. Jake looked at him expectantly. "You good?" David grinned, a weight lifting off his chest. "Better than good." And he meant it. That confrontation wasn't about Emily. It was about David. It was about proving to himself that he was stronger than his past, stronger than the lies, and stronger than the person who tried to tear him down. Emily's apology didn't matter. Her regrets didn't matter, because David realized that closure isn't about someone else's guilt. It's about your own healing. So, what can we learn from David's story? Sometimes life will give you a final test, a moment where your past comes back, trying to pull you under. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can let it drag you back into the darkness, or you can stand tall, say goodbye, and keep moving forward. David chose to let go. He chose to rise above the pain, the drama, and the chaos Emily had brought into his life. And in doing so, he took back his power. The lesson here: you are not defined by the people who betray you. You are defined by how you rise after they're gone. David walked out of that bar with his head held high, knowing that he was free. Free from Emily. Free from the past, and free to build a future he truly deserved. All right, guys, what do you think? Have you ever faced a moment like David's, where someone from your past tried to pull you back in? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, relatable stories like this one. Remember, moving on isn't just about letting go of someone else. It's about reclaiming yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. When David left that bar, something shifted inside him. It was subtle at first, but for the first time since this entire mess started, he felt free. Not just free from Emily, but free from the questions, the second-guessing, the wondering what he could have done differently. Because the truth, there was nothing he could have done. Emily's choices were hers, and they had nothing to do with him. Over the next few months, David's life continued to get better. He leaned into the people who mattered, his friends, his family, and most importantly, himself. Now let me tell you something about David, this whole experience. It didn't break him, it made him. He used the pain as fuel to rebuild himself into someone stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever before. He started hitting the gym regularly, not to impress anyone, but for himself. Feeling strong physically helped him feel strong mentally. He focused on his career, landing a promotion at work that he'd been chasing for years. He poured his energy into things that actually gave him value. And most importantly, he started saying no to the things and people that drained him. He wasn't wasting time on people who didn't deserve him anymore. Jake, of course, noticed the transformation. "Man, I don't even recognize you anymore," he joked one night. In a good way, obviously. David smiled. "I feel like myself again. You know, for the first time in a long time." And he meant it. But here's where the story comes full circle. About 6 months later, David was out for a morning run in the park. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, one of those annoyingly perfect mornings, and that's when he saw her. Emily sitting on a bench by herself, staring down at her phone. For a split second, David froze. Not because he felt anything for her. He didn't. But because it was so surreal. Here was this person who had caused him so much pain, and now she looked small. Sad, like someone who had finally realized the consequences of her actions. She looked up and saw him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Emily gave him a weak smile, as if to say, "Hi. And I'm sorry." David didn't stop running. He nodded politely, just a small, quiet acknowledgement, and kept going. Because the truth is, he didn't need anything from her anymore. Not an apology, not an explanation, nothing. That moment wasn't about Emily. It was about David. He'd already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his own. Holding on to anger would have only kept him tied to her, and David was done being held back. So, what's the moral of David's story? We all go through heartbreak. We all experience betrayal at some point in our lives, whether it's from a partner, a friend, or someone we trusted. And in those moments, it's easy to let the pain consume us, to let anger and bitterness take over. But here's what David learned, and what we can learn too. You can't control someone else's actions, but you can control how you respond. Emily lied, cheated, and manipulated. That was on her. But David chose to walk away with his dignity intact. Sometimes, letting go is the most powerful thing you can do. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to know your worth. Healing isn't about getting an apology or seeing someone else suffer. Closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from accepting what happened, forgiving yourself, and moving forward. You are not defined by someone else's betrayal. David came out of this stronger. He didn't let Emily's actions destroy him. He let them make him better. And let me tell you, there's nothing more satisfying than rising above the people who tried to tear you down. Fast forward to today, and David's doing great. He's happier, healthier, and thriving in ways he never thought possible when he was in the middle of the storm. And here's the best part. He's not bitter. He doesn't hate Emily, and he doesn't wish her ill. He genuinely hopes she learns from her mistakes and becomes a better person, because that's what moving on really looks like. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about finding peace within yourself and creating a life that makes you happy. David's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about resilience. It's about learning to trust yourself again, even when someone else has broken that trust. And if David can do it, so can you. So, if you take anything away from this story, let it be this. You are stronger than you think. You are worthy of love and respect, and no matter how much someone hurts you, they don't get to decide your future. You do. Heartbreak might knock you down, but it's up to you to decide how you get back up. David chose to rebuild himself, and in doing so, he created a life far better than the one he left behind. And that's the power of letting go. All right, guys. That wraps up David's story. What do you think? Have you ever had to rise above someone who hurt you? How did you heal and move forward? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you overcame it. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend who might need a little inspiration, and subscribe to the channel for more relatable, powerful stories like this one. Because remember, sometimes the best revenge is living well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.